Macon, Georgia. Just a little bit about Macon. Right now it's 94 degrees there. It'll be 99 is the high today. Right now in Boulder it's 63 degrees here. So Fred and I are very happy to be here in Boulder today. We're looking at the same forecast for tomorrow though on our plane.
What's the humidity like?
The humidity is extremely high. The heat index is probably like 106 or 107. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, old people dropping like flies, right?
Pretty much.
We got a flood watch in New York. That's when they're trying to play the U.S.
Okay, thanks. Good luck. This presentation is going to be, it's do-it-yourself versus paying for stuff. But it's going to be heavily focused on the do-it-yourself side because that's what we've tended to do lately at Mercer. But I'm going to touch on the pay side too. Basically, I've created about 10 rules of DIY versus PAY, and I'll share those with you as I go through the presentation. And we'll start with rule number 1. If you can easily do it yourself, why pay for it? Who changes projector bulbs at your schools? The staff? When I came to Mercer, we were paying an outside company $150 an hour to replace projector bulbs. And of course, they had a minimum 1 hour charge, so basically we were paying $150 for a guy to climb up a ladder and change out a projector bulb. We've discovered that it's not too bad to stand on the table and reach up and change a projector bulb.
Does OSHA know?
And we don't have union rules in Georgia.
Our union's like, go ahead, do it. We don't want to do it.
Actually, Mercer had like a $16 million budget deficit a couple of years ago after we changed presidents, and the past president didn't quite do accounting stuff right, and the new president wanted to do it right. We were left with like a $16 million shortfall in the budget. So everybody started, cutting their budgets and saving where they can, and this is sort of where this came about. All of this fluff had to go. So now we change out, obviously, our own projector bulbs. And that's Fred's hand. He's our instructional technology coordinator.
Actually, I don't climb ladders at all.
And Fred is actually scared of heights, so it's actually...
So is that trick photography?
That's one of the low projectors.
The projector is actually lower than that, and he's standing in a chair with like another kid. So I said, could you just pose for a photo for me? So $150 to change out a projector bulb. That's not including the cost of the bulb, which you all know are horribly expensive. We typically lose a projector bulb maybe once a month, once every other month. And we have 15 projectors across the building. So if you say 6 projector bulbs over a year times $150, we're looking at $900 a year in savings by doing something simple, climbing a ladder and replacing a projector bulb. So if you can easily do it yourself, why pay for it? Another example is videotaping. We paid that same company $75 an hour to come in and record our high-profile events, like law review symposiums. The Georgia Court of Appeals comes about once every year, once every other year. We would pay these guys $75 an hour to come in and record events like that. And it was about 6 events a year, say a 2-hour event. Well, obviously we record everything ourselves now. And 6 events a year, that's another $900 in savings per year. We used to require a 24-hour notice if you needed an event recorded, so we could get those people out, schedule them, things like that. But now Fred has a pool of student workers that, we get a call 15 seconds before a class starts and says, can you record this class? And usually we can do it somehow. If nothing else, we can set the camera up, hit record, and leave, and come back later and turn those cameras off. Another way that we're saving money is in small seminar rooms where we want technology but we don't have a projector. What we're doing is installing LCD TVs, a 42, 47-inch LCD TV, maybe 2 of them on the wall. These rooms are probably about half the size of this room. Now we usually pay about $1,000 per TV. Of course, TV prices have came down since we bought them. So we have to get those TVs mounted somehow. So what do? We take a long lunch break, We all go out to lunch together, and then we go to Lowe's and get the screws or components we need to mount it into the wall, and we mount those TVs ourselves. And over the last 3 years, it's not much, we've mounted 7 TVs across the building. 1 in the student lounge, 2 in study rooms for students to review their videos or use them in other ways, and 2 in 2 seminar rooms. Now, we weren't initially going to mount the televisions ourselves, but our physical plant said we don't mount TVs. We won't touch a TV. So we looked at an outside company, and they wanted $500 per TV. Now that's a little ridiculous to pay $500 to mount a $1,000 television. You're already paying another $100 or so for the mount. That's just ridiculous. So we are in the TV mounting business. Now where do we find time for all this stuff? Now again, this is over 3 years or so. I've been at Mercer for 4 years, so my presentation is kind of covering the last 3 or 4 years. So if you look at it over the long term, this is really not that much time involved in doing this kind of stuff. Everybody has downtime. I mean, you want to show your dean you're busy, or you want to show your boss you're busy. But in reality, in education, we do have downtime, and we can find time to do stuff like this to save a dime here or there, or several $1,000s here or there. Now at Mercer, the majority of our of the other departments in the building are not do-it-yourselfers. Just last month, the library moved about a room of books this size from a storage area on the 3rd floor to a newly constructed area up in our attic. And this is storage. They're renovating their old storage in the faculty offices and stuff. Now the library has 11 employees. That doesn't account for the 4 of us in IT. That doesn't account for the lady on FMLA leave or the unfilled position. They have 11 employees sitting around during the summertime. Numerous student workers. So what do? They hired a moving company to come in and move the books. Now, most of our library is idling during the summertime. Again, they have numerous people. They paid these movers, there were 6 movers, and the movers were charging for a 2-man team $250 per hour. So they were basically paying $750 an hour for guys to move books. Now, that would have never happened in our IT department. You know, librarians apparently don't move books, but in IT we certainly move computers. So again, most of our law school is not do-it-yourselfers. They would rather pay and sit down and watch. And you can see our law library director closely supervising the movers. And I did not ask her permission to use her in this presentation, and I did not ask permission to use the Lowe's logo. And I was going to use Home Depot because Home Depot is based in Atlanta, so we're big Home Depot fans in Georgia. But Lowe's seemed to just jive better, you know, lunch and Lowe's. And we do go to Lowe's the majority of the time because it's closer to the law school than Home Depot is. And that brings me to my rule number 2. And this is my life motto. It's better to ask forgiveness than permission. So I'm sure Suzanne will hear that I used her picture in this. Hopefully Lowe's doesn't hear that I used their logo.
Advertising.
Yeah, I'm sure
Be
they're
paying
not
well.
well, they're thrilled that you're using it.
They'll be a sponsor next year.
We get calls from time to time to maybe a department is wanting to add a network printer, or they're gonna, you know, someone's gonna move their desk around and wants a network drop on this side of the wall or over here, or something like that. Now we have our relationship with main campus has gotten better over the last few years, but it's still not where it probably should be. If we call main campus to do one of those network drops, they're going to charge us $200 per port. If we have 4 drops going to the same plate on the wall, here's 2 drops right here, this would cost $400. And you know, they tie the cables together and it's just really one pull. They charge us twice the price. If something's broke, it's $100 an hour plus materials. And time frame with main campus, they may come this afternoon, they may come next week, they may come 2 weeks from now. So if somebody is waiting on that network printer to be, you know, activated, or if someone really needs their desk moved and their computer hooked up without wires going across the floor, you know, that's just not acceptable. And we just implemented IP phones last week, so now we're probably going to start doing this a little bit more, since we need network ports in certain areas and they're not there. So what we do, we take our Lowe's IT lunch break, We go to Lowe's and buy a 1,000-foot box of cable for about $70. So that's what it was about 2 years ago. I think cable prices have gone up a little bit since then. The wall deck and plate are about $7 each. We have a crimper and a tester to crimp the ends of the network cable on hand. And our building is made up of drop ceilings just like this, and you just run it down the hollow wall. Most of the walls are hollow, the interior walls, and across the ceiling to your network closet. It's very simple. We work on our time frame. We can prioritize the network drop in with everything else that's going on in the building. And we can do a much more efficient job. But also there's cost savings. We've probably ran about 8 of these network drops over the last 3 or 4 years. So again, it's not much. We don't do this on a regular basis. So you can see with us doing it versus the university doing it, we're saving about $1,500. Now I talked about we're having some renovations done in our building, and there's new faculty suites being built. We're not running network drops to all of those suites. That's part of the construction. So we're not, pulling that cost out of the construction and saying we'll do that ourselves. We're just talking about these little calls that we get that I need a network drop here, I need a network drop there.
Does the university know that you do that?
No, that's why it's better to ask for forgiveness.
That's the real words again.
The university doesn't like for us to mess with infrastructure that much. They didn't at first, but again, I said that they're getting better. They see that if we do this, it's something else off of their plate that they don't have to deal with. So it's a win for us and it's a win for them. And they're actually getting more and more comfortable with giving us passwords to switches and things like that. We're buying the switches, we're paying for it. We're buying the wireless access controller and things like that. You better give us the passwords to it. That's the law school budget that's gone.
And your law school's not on your...
That's right. I should have clarified that. Our law school is about 1.5 miles from the Mercer University campus, so we're in effect our own campus.
Right.
But
you need to have those passwords.
And for the university to drive over, it's, I got to drive to the law school, man. And it's a mile. We go to the university.
And you're up on the hill.
Oh, and we're up on
Yeah, yeah.
We're up on the highest point in Macon.
10 feet rise, or?
Oh no, it's substantial.
Oh, okay.
It's a substantial hill.
Georgia has hills.
But you drive it. It's nothing like the hills around here. So one advantage to doing these network ports is we know where that printer's plugged in. We know where all the wireless access points are plugged in so that we keep them in the power over Ethernet switches and not the other switches. We know where all the phones are plugged in the network closets so that they're, again, in the power over Ethernet switches. We know our network back and forth. If there's a problem, we know pretty much exactly where that port's plugged in the network closet, and we can resolve that problem pretty quick. Again, if we call the university, they may prioritize it and come over immediately, or if they're not doing anything, or it may be a week before they come over to fix someone's telephone, or things like that. So rule number 3, try it before you buy it. How many of you guys got this in the mail, things like this, over the last couple of weeks or months leading up to Cali? I probably got more than 2, but most of the stuff that comes to the law school and the snail mail for me is junk, and I just trash it. Technical magazines and things like that. They stopped by to sell us their product, of course, a while back. Is anyone using the Point Link suite?
I'm using the seating chart on Facebook.
Seating chart.
Just curious. And I'm not knocking their product in any way. But they stopped by to sell us their suite a while back, and a lot of it we already had in the pipeline. We've been doing our own course pages for over 9 years. We had a student directory under development, which I'll talk about in a little while. Online photo directory, we had already began developing that, and I'll talk about that in a little while as well. And course evaluations, we had that in the pipeline as well. One thing that we didn't have was the seating chart generator. And one of our secretaries, apparently he spoke with her on the way out, and she's, oh, this is wonderful, we have to get this, we have to get this. Now before they were creating seating charts, they had a word template of each room, and they would go insert image from file, browse to the student's picture, inserted in there. And if you have a contracts class with 75 students in it, that takes quite a while. And the file size of that Word document is huge, because typically the photos that we store, high resolution photos, and our secretaries don't understand resizing photos, you know, regardless if it's for the website, a Word document, or PowerPoint. They just end up with huge files. So what we did is we kind of created our own. This is done in Visual Basic, and this was actually done by my boss, Chris Bombardo, who you may have met at the electronic Blue Book table. He wrote electronic Blue Book as a law student, so he's well versed in Visual Basic. I do more of the web programming stuff up until now. We just hired our web developer this week, and we actually left him in the office while the rest of us came out to Cali, and we're hoping he'll be there Monday morning when we get back. But helped me get out of the web business a little bit. So he wrote this seating chart program. Again, we already have all the photos of the students. They're taken during orientation week when the first years come in, and we use the same photo for 3 years. And then they have a new photo taken for the, we call the,
Classification.
now the thing when they graduate, all their pictures are on the wall. The composite, that
Oh.
So we have their photos. All we did was get an export from the registrar of all the students in the building. We popped it into a SQL table, and we use that SQL table for pretty much everything now, as well as the photos, which I'll talk about. But easy seating chart. This one's a little bit rough. The screen capture of this was actually remoted in through a Mac to a PC because this only runs on PC, and so that's why it's skewed a little bit. But definitely, if you have the time or the will, try something before you just go out and give a vendor several $1,000s. It took Chris probably a day and a half to do this. It's really not complicated. There's no external components that he had to buy or any special classes or anything that he had to write for this. It's a pretty simple program. Number 4, if you're in the do-it-yourself, if you do it yourself in a pay culture, have a prototype ready. A lot of our faculty, when we try to tell them, you know, we can do this to save you time, we can do this to eliminate this horrible paper process, they can't picture it. So my next example sort of follows all 4 of these rules. During a casual conversation with the registrar, she said, I wish we could do some sort of online course evaluations. And what they were doing before, each student for each class would get something that looks like this. Now one time it was actually a Scantron form, but the Scantron machine broke, and so they stopped ordering the custom Scantron forms, and they just ran copies, and this is no longer scannable in any way, even if we had a Scantron machine. So these are passed out to every student in every class, and when they're collected, the registrar has had a person who would sit there and enter it into an Excel spreadsheet. A 4 would be a 1, excellent would be a 5, and she would go down 1, 2, 5, 4, 3, for thousands and thousands of these. It would take her 2 weeks per semester just to enter all the data in the spreadsheet. And then someone on main campus wrote a script for her to come out with a really rustic looking report. Nobody really knew what the data meant or the information meant at the end of their report. And they had been using this for years and years and years. And so, in a casual conversation, the registrar said, I wish we could do some sort of online course evaluation. So, I had a little bit of free time that week, and in about 4 hours, we came up with a little web program for students to go to, and they would key in a code, and it would take them right into their course, and they could do a course evaluation. We planned on using the same questions and things like this, and it was all ready to go. And so our associate dean said, well, let's run it by the faculty policy committee. Now it took me 4 hours to write the website and the report to do that. Policy committee, it took them a year and a half to go through. Because you know faculty, it's not, it was just a question, can we go from paper to laptops? well, they get it, are the questions, still relevant? Should we redo the questions? What if I want to add customized questions for my course? So it went round and round and round and round. And they did come up with a few rules for us. The evaluations have to be completed in class. There's a window from the first one to the last one. I think it's 20 or so minutes that from the time the first student submits the exam, that kind of opens up a window that all of the, that all the evaluations have to be submitted. And that prevents instructors from taking home the extra codes and, enter them in and skewing the results or something like that. So what we do is, the reports in this actually come out of Microsoft Access. All of the data is on our web SQL server, and I use the Access front end so that the registrar's office can use it easily. And they go and click report for that semester, and it gives them this. And it basically prints out 6 of these per page. So instead of each student getting 1 page, they get 1/6 of a page. So we're sort of going green. We're using 16% of the paper that we used to use. We still had to have paper because each student for each class needed a special access code. And they're random in an envelope and just passed out. I initially wanted to email out the access codes, but the students would think, then they could tie my email address to this code, and the faculty thought that they may not get the results that they wanted to get. So we do still have a paper process in place. So they take this and they go to the website and they enter the access code. And it's just a simple form. They go through and answer the 13 questions, and then they make their comments. Now, one thing with this is they type a lot more here than they ever wrote on the back of these forms. I guess because they're more comfortable with typing, or I don't know, they just type a whole lot of stuff that they would have never said before in handwriting. And I should mention that we do have a laptop program at Mercer. Every student has a laptop. We purchase them for them, we issue them, we maintain them, so every student does have a laptop. We do still include these ancient paper forms in the packet in case the faculty member forgot to tell them, make sure you have your laptop, it's going to be evaluation day, or if some student's laptop isn't working, or for some reason they can't get on the website. And the registrar's office still takes this, and they have a special version of this that they go to, and they go to the course and they enter the student data just like this. It's no longer, 1, 2, 3, it's just click, 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 just like the form. So what used to take the registrar's office 2 weeks a semester and maybe a half weekend for a summer semester, now takes her about 2 hours per semester. So we basically took a month out of her job. We eliminated that just with this program.
What's your response rate for the evaluations?
As far as
the students, filling them out?
they're allotted class time. So
No,
for each-
I mean the percentage of that actually fill out the evaluations.
The high 90
Really?
something percent. Because again, the faculty member passes this out, they're allotted, 15 minutes or so at the end of the class. They're already there. Sometimes it's at the beginning of the class.
We had on my evaluations, and our highest response rate was like the first semester, 60%. The faculty went back to paper, and I think they're realizing that, maybe we should go back to computer.
Well, that's what's kind of nice about a hybrid system, because we have the same issue, online evaluations, you have fairly low response rate.
Yeah.
But by passing it out in class.
Yeah.
And that's why we
I think
did it
that's
in
what we're going
class.
back.
That's one of the things that the policy committee came out with. They wanted to continue doing it in class because there's a lot of time, the students are already there and they're told to do it. And there's really no excuse for them not to do it.
We went to online this year, and the rate was 60%. And people started to get a little anxious, and then so I asked, well, what was the rate with paper? Because I never managed the paper. Nobody knew.
We knew actually it was higher, strangely it was higher. We had some students who said, well, we're worried about confidentiality. And I'm like, I helped design the program, and I had students ask me, when they accidentally, I don't know how they accidentally filled out the wrong one, but because it was a drop list and stuff, and I'd say, I don't know, I can't help them. I don't know the data. We purposely separated it at a certain point.
We run a system where you can't get your grades until you fill out the evaluation.
Well,
We
so
need
with
to
that,
That's the way to go.
hold your grades hostage.
So with that,
Or exam number.
with that though, the response has to be tied somehow to that particular student.
Right.
And the students or the faculty will worry about that student could potentially be traced.
Well, you could separate the student's response from the student's participation.
But they don't realize that. And we can do that, but just like I could with their email addresses if I emailed them the access code, but they don't realize that you're doing that on the back end, because on the back end I could easily do it the other way as well.
Without the slip of paper, it's only confidential. With the slip of paper, it actually becomes anonymous. That's the only way. By randomly handing the slips of paper.
And actually, I could look up the IP address of the response and look through the logs or the DHCP logs and see who answered that survey.
Don't say that
But
on tape.
I don't have the time or the. There's
Analyze
nothing
that.
they could write about an instructor that would prompt me to do that.
Other than a death threat possibly, but beyond that.
I don't know that I would do it. Someone would have, that would have to come from the top down. We must know who did this. But there's probably 3 students they would have narrowed it down to by the end.
Those are all transfers from memory.
So this is what the report looks like. They get a little decimal number between 0 and 5, and they can actually see how they compare with an average of all the responses in the law school. I did initially have a 3rd column so they could compare themselves with all contracts classes, all sections of contracts and things like that. We have a lot of classes where there's 2 sections of contracts. And so if your score is higher than the all contracts score, you know you did better than the other professor and that this was low. So we scratched that. We wanted to make this as possible.
It's a nice looking report.
And they get a separate page for the comments. Another thing, the registrar had to type in all the comments that were written before, so all that's automatic now. So you can imagine why it took 2 weeks, not only putting them in the spreadsheet, but typing out all the comments as well. This is for a legal research class that's taught by the law librarian, and they typically get very, very good scores on there, so I chose one of those too. Number 5, sometimes you have to pave the cow path. Has anybody heard that before?
Yep.
Basically, cows are, I guess, notorious for, like, if you're going from here to there, you kind of go all around. With our classroom technology, our faculty are used to doing something a certain way. We're in the process right now of redoing all the classroom technology on our first floor, as far as replacing the components inside the podium. I guess they're actually in the wall in this building, but ours are all inside the podium. So we pretty much just have to pave over the cow path, just make the technology look nicer and work better. We can't make any huge changes or that will completely throw off our faculty, and they won't know how to turn the projector on and off or how to use the computer. And then we're back to square one with using technology in the classroom. We have to retrain everybody. So these are some snapshots of our podium before, and our biggest problem was this Crestron system. When they had these classrooms done 5 to 6 years ago, they got these wireless Crestrons. And I guess they thought at the time that whoever was going to be running the classroom would be somewhere in the audience and they would want to take the Crestron with them and switch between. So these wireless Crestrons are never used away from the podium. But the problem is the batteries are dying in them, and they're $100, $150 to replace the battery. And so if they're slightly off, the batteries die and the professors come in, the Crestron's not working, the Crestron's not working. So our primary goal was really to eliminate the Crestron, and also go to some newer technologies like HDMI and things like that, to put those in the classroom. Another thing is, whatever shows on the screen does not necessarily show on the monitor if you're not using the computer. We wanted to redo that so that if you're using the document camera, you wouldn't have to look like this. You could just glance at the computer screen and see exactly what the students see. Now this is the audio side of the classroom podium, and the audio worked really well in the classroom. We weren't really redoing the audio system. It worked really well. This is the other side. We had the TV, VCR, the wireless mics. We had the Kramer with 4 switches, and then this is the processor for that Crestron box that sits on top. Well, of course, we went out and we got a quote from a company, and I think it was $15,000 or $20,000 per classroom. We ended up doing it for $3,000 per classroom. This is another problem we wanted to eliminate. If you open up the back of the podium, this is what you saw, and this is from
That's my podium.
several years of troubleshooting. You know, something goes out, you clip a couple of cable management ties, and eventually it becomes this cluster web of cables. And here's another picture and another, and it just, we really wanted to clean that up, and we we couldn't do it without unplugging everything, so we might as well redo the classroom and clean it up at the same time. So this is what we ended up with in the end. Kramer, the switch that switches between your devices, actually makes this little 8-button thing. Now in our classroom, all our faculty need are projector on and off, volume up and down, and they need the ability to switch between laptop, desktop, document camera, and TV VCR, or TV DVD, VCR DVD player. That's pretty much all you need in a standard classroom. So that's exactly what these 8 buttons do. You have volume up, volume down, projector on, projector off, laptop, computer, document camera, DVD VCR. Also, the laptop inputs on the top of the podium in the downstairs classrooms, they use some kind of weird proprietary input. It went VGA out of the laptop, and then it was like some sort of 15-pin or 9-pin into the thing. So we have these special cables that are floating around that were made by this vendor. And whenever they need those cables, we can never find them. When someone's ready, I need to use my laptop. I have no idea where this cable is. Call Fred, where's the cable? I don't know what's in the courtroom. Where's this cable? So we wanted to go VGA with all of the inputs so that we have something standard. And this plate is actually easily swappable for a DVI. As laptops come with DVI outputs, we can easily swap that out. We did all of this ourselves, mounting the plates. We had the big hole where we ripped out the Crestron component, so we put some little trays there. We bought the trays at Lowe's. The associate dean hates those yellow trays, and so we are tasked this summer with actually spray painting them black or something.
Doug Mockett's grommets. They've got great grommets. You should check them out.
We were actually on a long lunch break, and we stopped by Walmart to get some spray paint, but Chris didn't have his tax exempt number, and the Walmart employee had no clue what to do, so we put the spray paint back on the shelf after a few word exchanges with the Walmart employee. And we meant to pick up spray paint the last trip of Lowe's, but we just forget it every time we go to Lowe's. It's not really a high priority. I think the yellow thing's still fun. It jumps at you and reminds you to put the eraser back in place.
Keep the chocolates out of your contacts.
And also, we wired the monitor on the desk so that it's showing exactly what's going on the screen. So that it confuses the faculty at first, but then after they use it, they like it again because they can see the video from the DVD VCR from the document camera without breaking their neck. Here's a shot of some of the cable cleanup we've done. We still got a little ways to go. We still need to go back with a shop vac and suck all the dust out of there because when we added those plates, we actually had to use a jigsaw and cut out a little bit. And let me tell you, IT guy using power tools is just so much fun. And of course, doing the classroom technology, we went out to Lowe's several times to buy the plates and things like that. We know our Lowe's very well.
Buying tools?
We are starting to acquire tools. When we were doing the wireless access points, we had this old wooden ladder that would do like this, and 2 people had to hold it. We were putting an access point in the dean's office, and the dean came out, and she was like, "Be very careful." And one of us mentioned, "Yeah, it'd be nice to have a ladder." And she said, "Go for it. Go to Lowe's and buy a ladder." So we bought this little $90 ladder, and one of the ones that sit like this and go like that and expand like that. It's the coolest ladder.
And that was your bonus that year. That's nice, man.
It's the best bonus I've ever gotten.
I'll have to talk to Chris about that one.
So here's some of the new components we added. We added a larger Kramer, and so we can flip through more devices if we ever add devices such as HDMI devices. What we eventually want to do is use every room as an overflow room for the courtroom. So that right now we have Classroom C as an overflow room for the courtroom. So in a big event, we can throw audio and video down there. But sometimes Classroom C is scheduled when a special event is scheduled. So we want the flexibility to be able to throw the audio and video to any room. That's why this Kramer has so many switches, or so many buttons, other than the 4 that you saw in the Kramer before. We also integrated a power device. If you saw those shots of all the cables before, if you count, you can't really see them, but there's about 5 surge protectors inside this podium. And it's probably not the safest way to do things. So by integrating this power device, you have one on-off switch for the entire thing. We actually have a plate on the side with a key, and our student worker can come in the morning and turn it on where the system can be used and turn it off if you don't want the system to be used at night.
That Furman's a filter too, isn't it? Power filter.
Yes. So it shows you how you can pave over the cow path to keep the faculty happy. They pretty much use it in the same way, but it's so much more efficient. And with less devices in there, if something goes out or if we need to troubleshoot something, we can go right in there and do it. And since we put the system together, we know how it works. When the vendor put it together before, they used all those proprietary cables and things like that. So they pretty much made it, if something went out, we would have to call the vendor for support. And I guess that's how they stay in business, but you know, when a classroom system goes out, we need that classroom system back up immediately because we find out about it at the beginning of class and not, you know, at some time where we can take time and troubleshoot. We usually troubleshoot between, you know, in front of 75 students.
How do you find you know, the amount of time you spent before just dealing with the vendor, getting quotes, getting them scheduled in and all that versus just doing it yourself? I mean, what's the time savings?
There's probably a little bit more time spent because the time we spent getting the quote from the vendor before, Chris probably spends an equal amount of time choosing the components and ordering them out. Where we used to tell the vendor we want it to do this, and they would choose the individual components and make it work. Now we're tasked with choosing the individual components, but we can look at it at a larger scope, like interfacing with the classroom. We know how the wire is going to come down from the classroom, and we know how it can interface with the back, and things like that.
You do some cross-training, I'm guessing, so that if someone gets hit by a bus, that knowledge is...
Wins the lottery.
Wins the lottery.
Oh, sorry.
This was a summer project. We've done 2 of the 4 classrooms that we plan to do this summer, and all 3 of us are actually involved in doing it. Because it's summertime and it's easier to take all 3 of us down and work in the classroom. And that sort of is cross-training. By putting it together, all 3 of you know how it works. The reason it's being stretched out over the whole summer is some of the components we can order before June 30th, and some we have to wait until after July 1st to order. So Chris has a stack of stuff in his office, but we can't put it together yet because we're missing some pieces of the puzzle for that classroom. Other times you might not want to pave over the cow path. Our career services office used to put out this Facebook once a year, and I don't know if any of your law schools do something similar. Yeah. They publish this Facebook and they send it to employers at all the law firms that have ever hired our students. Hundreds and hundreds of copies. And they also have to print out a copy for each student because the students like to look at themselves and see where their classmates went to school. Each year they pay about $6,000 in printing costs for this book and another maybe $1,500 to $2,000 in postage costs to send those to all the law firms. Also, it was a huge paper process. Career Services would put out a form and the students would have to manually write all this information on the form, turn it into the Career Services office. She would put it in some sort of spreadsheet or something, and then send it, as well as the CD of the student pictures, up to the publisher. Aside from the $6,000 printing cost, there was also some sort of cost for them to do the graphic design, setup cost, design fees, things like that. So again, we have all the student pictures, we have all the students in the database, and so I threw up one year, I said, well, let's put a little directory online and see where it goes. So we did a student directory online, and now it's become sort of our online Facebook. And after the first year, they still left the directory up and did this as we prepared the online directory for employers. This was sort of internal at first. And what you can do is you can go and select all students or by class. You can search for a name, or there's various descriptions right here. You can say where work contains this, or where school contains this. If you want to see everybody who went to school at the University of Georgia, you can pick school, type in UGA, and all the students will pop up. And for the screenshots for this, I just picked our rising third-year class. and there's 145 students. And yes, I did check to make sure that all these didn't have FERPA flags before I put them in my presentation, because this is just directory information and I'm fine doing this. I do ask permission with FERPA because we work very well with our registrar's office, and we don't want to violate that in any way.
So this is publicly available on your website then? Or?
No, this is actually behind our portal. Faculty, staff, adjuncts, and students can access this. And then employers who have already chosen students for interviews, they're given a special access where they can see certain bits of information. Another thing that we found with this was the good-looking students were getting the job interviews, and the ugly students were not getting so many job interviews because the employers were looking at the students first. At least that was the perception of the students who didn't get job interviews. I'm not getting a job interview because I'm ugly and you're putting this Facebook now. She's prettier than me and she got 3 job interviews and my grades are better than her. So to eliminate this, we don't give employers access to this until they've already chosen who they're going to do their on-campus interviews with. Did you have a question?
No, we did the same thing about 2 years ago and went through the whole FERPA consideration. We found the student copied it all off to a private site and republished it.
Oh,
It
no.
popped up in the internet, so we had to talk to them and kind of readjust the rules. It has to stay on our portal.
So we eliminated all the paper process. The students go into the portal and they actually key in all this information. And it goes into sort of a queue when they submit it. And the Career Services Department just goes through and makes sure that it's formatted in the way that the employers expect to see it and that they expect it to be presented. They don't verify the information. I mean, this person could say that they had a PhD from the University of Georgia and nobody would care until the employer requested transcripts or something like that. So we don't police the information. This is an employer view. This is all the employer sees, and again, it's all directory information, which is available if someone wanted to request it from Mercer. Address, phone number, email address. We also give the student an opportunity to type in a preferred email address because a lot of them might use their non-Mercer school addresses. Now, I have a different view when I go in and view it. I can actually see student schedules, and so can the registrar's office, because occasionally we need to track down a student to get in touch with them about their laptop or things like that. When the students go in and view it, they can choose which student organizations they're in, and they can click on that student organization and see all the other students who have designated that they're involved in that student organization. So it's kind of a networking tool for them. Our first years really like using it for career services type stuff because say if you're looking for someone that's an upperclassman that worked at a law firm that you're interested in interviewing at, you just search for that law firm and you can see people who have done summer associate jobs in that law firm. And you can go contact them by email or go to their house or however you'd like to contact them and say, you know, how do I get in the door here? What's the culture like? Things like that. So it's a great networking tool for career services, far more than that book ever was.
John, are your career services office using Simplicity?
They are. They're using Simplicity.
So there is some overlap.
Yes.
Yeah.
They weren't initially when we created this. We were on eAttorney, which sort of disappeared.
Yeah.
And so then we had to do this huge budget request to get Simplicity, or the Career Services Office does. We actually don't touch Simplicity.
It's one of the great things about it.
I think.
Yeah, we have no data in Simplicity on our semester. Another sister wants to.
So number 6,
That's all we do.
doing it yourself doesn't mean you can't have help. And whether that means third-party software or you know, purchasing a component to go with something you need. I mean, you can have sort of a hybrid. This year, our legal profession teacher wanted to implement blogs in his class. So what we did is we took Blog CFM. We're a Cold Fusion shop for now. We're about to jump into the Drupal stuff in the fall and get out of the Cold Fusion business. So we just took Blog CFM. We customized it a little bit to meet our needs so that the logins were the same and things like that. And this is the blog that we came up with, and he was really happy. The students were really happy with it. It worked out really well. Another thing that we did with our admissions department, they have a notebook in their office of local landlords who only want to rent to law students. And I don't know if they think that the law students are more responsible or if they just want a professional group of students. In Macon, there's tons and tons of old antebellum mansions all around the law school, and most of them have carriage houses in the backyard, and those are turned into little apartments and stuff. They're really cheap, maybe $300 or $400 a month. You don't want your typical Macon person who's looking for a $300 a month housing to live in there. You want a more professional law student to live in there, especially if you have invested this money and purchased in this old mansion, things like that. You just don't want anybody off the street living there. So they coordinate with our admissions department. So in a casual conversation with admissions, we said, you know, they said, I wish there was some way to scan all these pages and put them online so that these students wouldn't have to come in and just read this notebook of books. I said, well, let's not scan in those pages. Let's just have you enter them in a database. And so initially there was this housing database, and they could search within maybe 1 to 5 miles of the law school, housing there, or further and further. And so I took the Google Maps API, and what we came up with was this. And just to give you, here's Mercer University, and the law school is this orange one here in the center of that group of apartments. We make this available to our faculty, staff, students, adjuncts, and accepted students. As soon as the student's accepted, they get a login for our portal, and they can log on and start making contact with landlords before they arrive. They used to, if we had a accepted student from across the country, there was really no way for them to make contact with landlords, because you had to physically come to the admissions office, pick up this notebook, and go through all these paper ads in order to figure this out. The Google Maps API is really cool. It's really pretty. You can make little customized pins to go on it. Basically, I'm using the Cold Fusion to write tons and tons of JavaScript, and then the JavaScript then places the pointers on the map. You can zoom in and out of the map, you know, programmatically, things like that. And our students really, really like this. And we have professors that may move into town, and they don't have housing set up yet. They love this too, because they can find an apartment within walking distance from the law school. A lot of our faculty live outside of the Macon or the Georgia area, so when they're in town to teach, you know, they need an apartment as well, so that's why we open it up to our faculty and staff. So it's fun to have help, even if you're doing it yourself. Number 7. You can read number 7 for yourself and imagine what words you would put in there. For years and years, our server room was kind of out in our IT suite, and we have an open door policy, so we would have students, faculty, and staff literally walking by our servers, and occasionally one of them would think it was a normal computer, and they would try to log into it. And that's a huge security issue to have your servers accessible like that. So we wanted to move our servers into a storage room. Now the problem was the fiber box was ran to that common area instead of the storage room. So what we thought we would do is we would move the fiber box. Now this is the fiber line. It comes out of the hollow wall and goes up here, and then, you know, various pairs of fiber come out, and then they plug into here, and then this goes to our server switch, and then the servers plug into it. So look, they were these BNC connectors, and you see they're not anymore. We'll talk about that in just a second. So what we thought we would do is pull these BNC connectors out, enlarge the hole a little bit, and hopefully get them out one at a time, pull them up, and run them back down the other wall. We came in at 4 o'clock in the morning that day so as to not have any downtime with our servers. And of course, we pulled it out, threw it over the ceiling. There was plenty of slack in the ceiling, so we didn't have to run fiber or anything like that. We came down the other wall, opened the hole, the BNC connectors were gone. So we've got these little strands of fiber. Uh-oh, it's almost 8 o'clock, we've got to get the servers up. So we scrambled. We ran network wires from where we wanted the servers to be all the way out in the computer lab, like 50-foot runs across the floor, just to get the servers plugged in somewhere. So we were in a worse situation than we were in before. Long story short, we ended up calling a local vendor. We didn't tell the university that we did this. We ended up calling a local vendor who does fiber optics and network cabling, and they actually spliced these back together. It was really cool. They have a little device and a little camera, and they line up the glass just right, and then it was a really cool thing to see. It only cost like $80, so we probably still came out ahead. But I don't believe Chris will ever try to move, or I will probably try to ever move fiber optics again. But it worked out in the long run. Another thing that I don't touch, and not because I will F it up, it's more likely to F Yep. Is electricity. When we moved our servers, obviously we needed more power ran to the room, so we did call fiscal plant with that. So, avoid getting into stuff that you really might mess up or that might mess you up. Number 8, pay if you have better things to do with your time. And one thing that we've actually paid when we implemented wireless throughout the law school, the mounting of the access points. We actually had a company come in and mount them to the ceiling, 18 access points throughout the building. It would have taken us a couple of days to do, and with the whole wireless project, we had tons of other stuff going on. So it just made sense to pay for that. Other things we pay for, obviously, is our exam software. Even though the guy who wrote it works with us, we do still pay for it. I would encourage you not to try to write your own exam software, which this is probably not a good example in my case. Another thing we pay for is our email server. We're not going to sit there and write an email server program overnight. Some things you're just better off paying for. Number 9, and I'm speeding up a little bit now. It is okay to walk away sometimes. My description of this session said build, buy, or be left behind. And there are times where you might want to be left behind and drop a project. Cali 2006, RIP Mix Learn. I didn't go. My wife was 9 months pregnant, but Chris went and a couple others, and they came back, oh, podcasting. We've got to get on podcasting. And so, we're a little hesitant. Our faculty do not like being recorded. They don't like their lectures being put out there. I guess they don't like what they say to be documented and out there for everybody to listen to. So we picked a couple of faculty and we tried to have them podcast their intro courses, which are 5-day courses at the beginning of the semester. And we found that the podcasts just weren't being listened to. The students didn't want to go hear a lecture again after sitting in the class, even for review purposes. We did find that one instructor did do a weekly summary of his entire class, and the students were more likely to listen to the weekly summary than go sit through 5 hours of podcast at the end of the week. So we decided maybe it was best to be left behind on the podcasting front, and we may revisit it later as more students jump into the podcasting and things like that, and more faculty want to do that. Probably about a third of our faculty have been at the law school longer than I've been alive. So it's hard to get some of these people to jump into these new technologies like podcasting and things. So we decided to be left behind on the podcasting front. Number 10 and the final one is DIY doesn't mean you can't collaborate. Now, Cali's a great resource. The people around you are great resources, and we would love to work with your law school. If you have a similar project that we're looking at doing, we would love to collaborate and work with you and maybe save some time and stuff. Within Georgia, we've visited Emory Law School and John Marshall Law School, and we've actually had Emory visit us, and what we do is we go up for a half day and we see how they do things, and we eat lunch with them, and they come down for a half day and see how we do things, and we eat lunch with them. We've actually talked to Georgia State about doing something similar with them. So if you have other law schools within a few hours drive of you, go visit those law schools and see how they do things. It's one thing to see in a presentation at Cali, but it's another thing to spend a day with them and see step by step how they do things. So definitely, we'd love to collaborate with you, even if we're not close by and we have similar projects or similar goals. We'd love to, see what we can do to help you or what you can do to help us, or build a project together, even over, vast distances.
Yeah, it was you guys, actually, it was Chris's presentation a few years ago on how we use the JVC cameras, that we do that for our trial techniques.
Yep. I like that presentation better because it was the first presentation of Cali. We were the first one, and here I got booted to last. Chris was going to join me for this one, but he had to fly out early this morning, so when my presentation got booted to the end of it, it became my presentation instead of our presentation. So, do it yourself doesn't mean that you can't collaborate. Here's my information. If you want to collaborate with us, be glad to join up with you and see what we can invent or what we can revolutionize. Otherwise, that concludes my presentation. I was hoping there'd be more time for more discussion, but it looks like I'm finish short on time. But if you have any questions or comments, I can answer them, or Fred can, put him on the spot. Yes.
The building your own software thing is real. It's a big deal. Like I wish I had a happy story with this, but someone for our CLE was looking to do the whole talking head PowerPoint thing, like media site and all that sort of stuff. And I looked up the software resources and especially the hardware resources to do that. Thousands and thousands of dollars. In half a week, I coded up. I mean, really basic, but just something that would take a PowerPoint presentation and a set of timings and sync that to video with JavaScript. You know what I mean? And thousands of dollars. Now, of course, not used at all, but so that's the unhappy story with that. But still, I mean, vendors will charge you quite a bit for things that you can manage if you have coding ability.
And Chris and I are sort of script kiddies. He does the Visual Basic GUI type stuff, and I do the web type stuff. Where I worked before, I was the web developer and stuff, and I've gradually gotten into the systems administration. And so at this job, I'm the systems manager. But there's still time in my duties to do the web stuff, and we didn't have a web developer until now, so I was tasked with doing a lot of the web stuff. So we're like script kiddies. Chris will go home and write an application, overnight, and I'll go write it in a couple hours. That's just, I mean, if there's a problem, we like to solve it if we can. That's actually how Electronic Blue Book came out and things like that. When Chris was in law school, he collaborated with the law professor because they didn't like the other exam software vendors that were out there at the time. And no offense to the other exam vendors or a point link or anything like that. But with vendors, again, they use proprietary stuff so that they can keep charging you license fees or for customized cables or things like that. And there's a huge cost where if you do it yourself, you can build a more customized thing with only the features that you need instead of all these features that you don't need. So we found in most cases we try to do it ourselves at least first. Anyone else?
I think we're all believers.
You're all ready to go win the Kindles.